Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is John Porrabill, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. While we cannot be together in body today, we are grateful to be together in spirit as we gather in this virtual space. It's not the same thing as being with each other physically, but it's what we have for now, and we hope you will find this time comforting and sustaining. If you are a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please let us know you're here by posting a comment on our live Facebook feed, or by getting in touch with our membership director, Bethany Thornton, at sunnyhillmembership@gmail.com. We would love to let you know how you can connect with the congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Our opening words, titled "The Wound," were written by Wendell Berry in 1969, before the use of gender-inclusive pronouns. If the white man has inflicted the wound of racism upon black men, the cost has been that he would receive the mirror image of that wound into himself. As a member of the dominant race, he has felt little compulsion to acknowledge it or speak of it. The more painful it has grown, the more deeply he has hidden it within himself. But the wound is there, and it is a profound disorder, as great a damage in his mind as it is in his society. This wound is in me, as complex and deep in my flesh as blood and nerves. I have borne it all my life, with varying degrees of consciousness, but always carefully, always with the most delicate consideration for the pain I would feel if I were somehow forced to acknowledge it. But now I am increasingly aware of the opposite compulsion. I want to know, as fully and exactly as I can, what the wound is and how much I am suffering from it. And I want to be cured. I want to be free of the wound myself, and I do not want to pass it on to my children. Perhaps this is only wishful thinking. Perhaps such a thing is not to be done by one man or in a generation. Surely a man would have to be almost dangerously proud to think himself capable of it. And so maybe I'm really saying only that I feel an obligation to make the attempt, and that I know if I fail to make at least the attempt, I forfeit any right to hope that the world will become better than it is now.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals. Please rise in body and/or spirit and join us in singing our hymn, We Are Building a New Way.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free from hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way.
Once there was a kingdom everyone called Paradise. It was called Paradise not because it was any more beautiful or any richer than any other place, but because of the way the people who lived there cared for one another. In this kingdom, if a friend needed something from a friend, someone always stepped forward to help without even being asked. If a neighbor needed something from a neighbor, someone would respond cheerfully and graciously without ever asking for anything in return. Even if a stranger needed something, people came forward to help with hospitality and generosity and great kindness. All of this was because of the wise queen. The queen knew that her subjects would treat one another the way she treated them, so she was always careful and attentive and helpful, And even if she couldn't help someone, she would at least listen and express her concern. But at last the queen grew old, and she appointed her son, the prince, to rule in her place when the time came. Soon the queen died, and the prince assumed the throne. The prince, however, was not like his wise mother, and he did not treat people the way his mother did. Once the royal ministers approached him and said, "Your Majesty, there's a terrible problem. There is a famine in part of our land, and the people there are starving. We must do something." "They're starving?" said the prince impatiently. "Yes, starving. They have no food to feed their children." The prince said, "But I have plenty of food," and he bit into a big apple from this huge bowl of fruit before him. He said, "If they're starving, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." "Perhaps your Majesty didn't understand. People are suffering and they haven't any food to eat. They'll die if we do nothing." Still, he said, "Well, I'm sorry, but it's just not my problem." The ministers all shook their heads in disbelief and walked away. Just then, another group of messengers approached the throne. No one in the royal court seemed to be able to move the prince, no matter what they said. Every problem that was presented to him was met with the same response: "I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." Before long, more and more people in the kingdom were acting like the prince. When a friend needed help from a neighbor or a friend, the one who was asked would look bothered and respond, "You need help? Well, I'm sorry, but that's not my problem." And since they refused to help one another, they certainly refused to help any strangers that came into their midst. Soon the kingdom had completely changed. It was no longer paradise, and no one remembered the way things had been. No one but a fisherman who remembered the old queen and the way things used to be. One day this fisherman gathered all his money and bought tools and paint and materials. He set to work fixing up his old fishing boat. His plan was to turn it into a yacht, the most beautiful yacht in the harbor. Everyone came the day the yacht was finished to take a ride on it, even the prince himself. And it was a beautiful, clear day. The sun shone and the lake was calm. The fisherman guided the yacht with everyone aboard out onto the lake, far away from the shore. But late in the afternoon, the winds picked up and the boat began to rock. And some of the guests got nervous and said, "Can we head home now?" And the fisherman said, "Yes, but there's just one thing I need to do." He went to his toolbox, got out a big drill, went to the center of the boat, positioned the drill on the hull, and began to drill a hole. People asked, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm drilling a hole." And they said, "Why?" He said, "Why? Because it's a great day for drilling holes." But they said, "Fisherman, if you drill a hole in the boat, water will rush in and we'll all drown." As he continued drilling, passengers began to cry and beg, "Please, please, please stop." But the fisherman said, "Nope. It's my boat, it's my drill, and I'm going to drill this hole." Someone remembered that the prince was on board and said, "Please get the prince. He'll talk with the fisherman and he'll save us." Well, the prince came forward, stood over the fisherman in his royal robes, and a hush came over the frightened crowd. "Fisherman," the prince said, "what are you doing?" he asked in his deepest, most commanding voice. "I'm drilling a hole," responded the fisherman, moving the drill around and around. "Why are you doing this?" the prince asked. "Because I feel like it. responded the fisherman. He didn't even look up to the prince as he kept drilling. The prince said, "Fisherman, if you make a hole in the boat will sink and we'll all drown." "Uh-huh," acknowledged the fisherman, and small beads of sweat started to appear on the brow of the prince, and he lost the commanding tone in his voice, and he started looking like a sincerely worried man. "Fisherman," he said, "I command you to stop." But the fisherman kept drilling and drilling, and the prince was quickly losing his composure. Gone was his royal tone. Instead, he was just another frightened person. "But fisherman, what gives you the right to do this?" The fisherman patiently explained, "It's my boat, it's my drill, and I'm going to make a hole. Now please move aside. You're blocking my light." And he continued to drill. The prince began to cry and plead like everyone else. When the prince began to cry, the fisherman at last stopped drilling. He said, "You don't want the boat to sink?" He said, "You don't want to drown? Well, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." The prince cried desperately, "What do you mean it's not your problem? Anyone can see that if I have a problem, you have a problem. And if you have a problem, I have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem, because we're all stuck here on this boat together." He stopped, the prince did, like a man who had suddenly figured out a great riddle. He repeated the words again. "If I have a problem, you have a problem. And if you have a problem, I have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem, because we're all stuck here on this boat together." "Anyone can see that," the prince said. "Yes," said the fisherman, "anyone can see that. Anyone on this boat can see that." "Now," the fisherman said, "we can go home." And he picked up the drill, turned the boat around, and sailed it safely back into the harbor. The people who got off of that boat were changed. Never, ever again would friend turn to friend, or neighbor turn to neighbor, or to a stranger and say those terrible words. Instead, whenever a friend needed help from a friend, or a neighbor needed a hand from a neighbor, or a stranger needed some kindness, whenever anyone came before the prince, he or she would hear these words, "Please let me help you. Because if you have a problem, I have a problem. And if I have a problem, you have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem. Because you see, we're all here stuck in this thing together." And once again, the kingdom was paradise. Some people die for honor. Some people die for love. Some people die while singing to the heavens above. Some people die believing in the cross on Calvary's hill. And some people die in the blink of an eye for a $20 bill. Some people go out in glory, yeah, with the wind at their back. Some get to tell their own story write their own epitaph. Sometimes you see it coming, sometimes you don't until you run out of breath with a knee on your neck or a $20 bill. Oh, brother, I never knew you. And now I never will. But I make this promise to you. I'll remember you still. Take, eat, this is the body. It's time to break the bread. Do this in remembrance, just like the good book said. Sometimes the wine is a sacrament. Sometimes the blood is just spilled. Sometimes the law is the devil's last straw, the future unfulfilled. Like the dream they killed for a $20 bill. Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows that have been submitted by members of the congregation. We share both the things that we are mourning and the things that we are celebrating so that they do not need to be held alone. You can submit a joy or sorrow through our website, or by calling the church office, or by sending an email to pastoralcare@sunnyhill.org. After each joy or sorrow that I share, please respond with me by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A joy from Julie Kirsch, one of our newer members. Julie and Rich Kirsch welcomed their first child, Owen Thomas, on June 15th. He weighed in at 7 pounds 7 ounces and 21 inches long. They say we are overjoyed to be new parents and enjoying time with the little one. To Julie and Rich, we hold you in our hearts. Another joy in the form of a baby. Carla Morado Cumming had her child Luna this past week, and she is looking forward to a time when she can come into the church and meet all of us. To Carla and her family, we hold you in our hearts. Pat Murray submitted a sorrow last week that has turned into a joy this week. Her cousin Jennifer Murray in Florida underwent a heart surgery this past Monday. And the good news is, the joy is that everything turned out fine. She's at home and recovering well. To Pat and Jennifer and their family, we hold you in our hearts. Also last week, Shelley and Vijay Chandok submitted a joy. They celebrated their 63rd wedding anniversary this week. To Shelley and Vijay, we hold you in our hearts. A final joy, our service auction, as most of you know, took place last night successfully. We'd like to hold in our hearts everyone who was involved in the service auction, from the organizers and all the participants. Thank you so much for participating. For all of you and for our entire Sunnyhill community, we hold you in our hearts. Let us also keep in mind all of those joys and sorrows that are held too closely to be shared at this time. I invite you to join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Breathing is something we tend to take for granted. Breathing in, breathing out, again and again. We do it without thinking, autonomically. We enter a room and breathe in. We take a seat and breathe out. Waking or sleeping, moving or sitting, our breath continues, taking in oxygen, moving it to every part of our bodies, sustaining our lives. But recently we have seen how breathing can be threatened by disease, by violence, by willful neglect or malice. How breathing can be threatened by ignorance, by hubris, by active and passive forces of oppression and marginalization. As we breathe in silence for the next minute, let us be fully aware and appreciative of the gift of breath and breathing. May we practice gratitude with each breath we take. May we appreciate and tend to our own breathing. And may we work to ensure that everyone has the right to breathe. Amen. I breathe in peace when I breathe out. I breathe out love when I breathe in. I breathe in peace when I breathe out. I breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe Breathe in, breathe out. The current conversation about policing in America was, of course, sparked by the widely shared phone video of the killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer last month. Rarely, if ever before, have we seen such blatant cruelty and horrific violence on display. It was sickening, disturbing beyond any words that might be used to describe it. And I wish I could say that it was a rare occurrence, but I think that we all know that it was not. It was unusually cruel, and because of the phone video, unusually public. But for Black people in America, such killings are nothing new, and sadly, they are not all that rare. While we might like to think of race-based police violence as something that has declined, the statistics tell another story. In the United States, Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people, despite the fact that Black people are 1.3 times less likely to be armed than white people, and despite the fact that they commit crimes at a rate that is no higher than the crime rate among whites. To understand our current situation with regard to policing, it's important to understand the historical roots of policing in our country. In the American South, policing as we know it began with armed men patrolling and looking for potential miscreants, began as slave patrols. As described by sociologist Connie Hassett Walker, these groups were squadrons made up of white volunteers empowered to use vigilante tactics to enforce laws related to slavery. They located and returned enslaved people who had escaped, crushed uprisings led by enslaved people, and punished enslaved workers found or believed to have violated plantation rules. The first of these patrols began in South Carolina in the early 1700s, and by the time John Adams became our second president in 1797, slave patrols existed in every state that had not abolished slavery. And at that time, 9 of the 17 existing states were slaveholding states. And these weren't just states in the deep South. They also included Delaware, Maryland, and New Jersey. Members of slave patrols could forcefully enter anyone's home, regardless of their race or ethnicity, based on suspicions that they were sheltering people who had escaped bondage. Now, the more commonly known precursors to today's police forces began springing up in large municipalities in the Northeast and Midwest in the early 1800s, beginning with Boston and then spreading elsewhere in the country. These police forces were, of course, overwhelmingly white and male, and their focus was more on responding to disorder than it was on protecting individuals or solving crime. These police forces were often deployed to quell labor uprisings and to protect the property of the rich and powerful. As Eastern Kentucky University criminologist Gary Potter explains, officers were expected to control a dangerous underclass that included African Americans, immigrants, and the poor. Through the early 20th century, there were few standards for hiring or training police officers, and police corruption was commonplace. So from the very beginning, police forces in America were specifically designed to keep the underclass in their place and to protect the rich. That's what they were designed to do, and it's still a part of the DNA of every police force in the United States. As early as the mid to late 1800s, the public recognized that there were major problems with police forces, and the first major effort at police reform began with the Lexow Committee in New York City in 1894, which was convened to address the routine bludgeoning of citizens by patrolmen armed with nightsticks or blackjacks, as the historian Marilyn Johnson has written. Subsequent attempts at police reform included the Wickersham Commission in 1931, the Kerner Commission in 1967, and most recently, the Obama administration's President's Task Force on Policing in the 21st Century. Recent reform proposals have often included such tweaks as implicit bias training for police officers, police community listening sessions, slight alterations of use of force policies, and systems to identify potentially problematic officers early on. But sadly, these reforms have not solved the problem. In part, reform has not worked because police forces are doing what they were designed to do, which is to enforce the status quo and protect the property and safety of the privileged over and above the rights of the oppressed and marginalized. That's what police forces were designed to do, and that's what they continue to do very well, despite repeated attempts at reform. Over the past 40 years or so, the situation has intensified as there has been a massive expansion of policing into our schools, among other places. And policing in general has become more aggressive, more invasive, and more militarized, with even small municipal police departments armed with military equipment and weapons. Alex S. Vitale, author of the book The End of Policing, says part of our misunderstanding about the nature of policing is we keep imagining that we can turn police into social workers, that we can make them nice, friendly community outreach workers. But the police are violence workers. That's what distinguishes them from all other government functions. They have the legal capacity to use violence in situations where the average citizen using violence would be arrested. Police are not social workers. They are violence workers. That's an important distinction, an important insight to keep in mind when we think about what to do about policing in America. When Vitale calls for an end to policing as we know it, he's not talking about throwing a switch that would instantly do away with all law enforcement. Rather, in his own words, what I'm talking about is the systematic questioning of the specific roles that police currently undertake and attempting to develop evidence-based alternatives so that we can dial back our reliance on them. And my feeling, Vitale says, is that this encompasses the vast majority of what police do. We have better alternatives for them. Vitale continues, even if you take something like burglary, a huge amount of burglary activity is driven by drug use. And we need to completely rethink our approach to drugs so that property crime isn't the primary way that people access drugs. We don't have any part of this country that has high quality medical drug treatment on demand. But we have policing on demand everywhere, and it's not working. It's not working. It's never worked, and there's no reason to think that policing as we know it will ever work when it comes to addressing the underlying problems that have been plaguing this country since its inception. Again, in the words of Vitale, when we turn a problem over to the police to manage, there will be violence because those are ultimately the tools that they are most equipped to utilize. Handcuffs, threats, guns, arrests. That's what really is at the root of policing. So if we don't want violence, we should try to figure out how to not get the police involved. Defunding the police may be a hard pill to swallow for many of us who are white and middle or upper class, in part because the police have done a pretty good job protecting us. We are protected by many layers of political, economic, and physical security, including the protection of the police. White America has, for centuries, chosen to believe the myth that police serve and protect everyone equally, but that's simply not the case. And it's not just a matter of a few bad apples. It's the way policing was imagined and designed and implemented. There are a lot of people who go into law enforcement in this country with excellent intentions. They really do want to serve and protect everyone equally. In fact, I believe that's the case for the vast majority of people going in to law enforcement. But once they become police officers, no matter what their intentions might be, they are a part of a system that is rotten down to its very roots. It's not necessarily the apples that are bad, it's the tree itself that has been poisoned with centuries of class and race-based violence. For this reason, more and more people are advocating for the abolition of policing as we know it. And it's time to take these ideas seriously. A fundamental shift needs to take place if we are serious about wanting to end police violence. This battle will not take place as much in the streets as it will take place in budget meetings on the municipal, county, and state levels. And it will not happen overnight. No one is seriously advocating mob rule. The defund the police movement is not about leaving people unprotected. It's about making radical changes so that everyone is protected more equally, and so that people are no longer victimized by a system of policing that has been so harmful to so many people for so long. But we have arrived at a critical juncture in our history as a nation. And we have a clear choice before us. We can pretend that all of the current problems can be solved with a few tweaks to the system, something that's never worked before. Or we can recognize that the system itself must be radically reimagined and start building the beloved community that we aspire to become. So what are we to do and where are we to begin? I would reiterate several points that I made a few weeks ago during our We Can't Breathe Vesper service. We need to fundamentally rethink the way policing occurs and put in its place a more just and humane system. We need to elect public officials who are really and truly committed to dismantling systems of oppression and hold them accountable for their actions or for their lack of action. We need to continue to educate ourselves and others about the history and continued presence of systemic racism that has for centuries robbed Black people of their breath and their right to breathe. As people of conscience, as people committed to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, as people engaged in creating a community of love and justice, we simply must do everything in our power to stop racist violence. We must. So while we are saddened by the ongoing violence, while we are saddened by the harm that is occurring, while we are enraged and angered by the way the president is inciting further racist violence, while we are disgusted by the seemingly endless cycle that we are seeing, we know that there is a way forward. I hope and pray that as we find our way forward on the path to more justice and more love, we will take up the mantle of liberation, and that we will not shirk from our responsibilities nor shrink from the difficult tasks that are ahead. May it be so. Amen. Please rise in body and or spirit and join in singing our hymn, Come and Go With Me.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. This week, our designated offering will benefit Campaign Zero. Campaign Zero is a project of the nonprofit organization We the Protesters, founded by Black Lives Matter organizer DeRay McKesson. Funds donated to Campaign Zero support the analysis of policing practices across the country, research to identify effective solutions to end police violence, technical assistance to organizers leading police accountability campaigns, and the development of model legislation and advocacy to end police violence nationwide. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org, click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the step-by-step instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, just choose either 2020 Pledge if you're paying on a pledge, or Designated Collections if you are giving to Campaign Zero this week. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. If, for example, you're texting a gift toward your pledge, dial 412-324-3130, enter $ amount followed by the word pledge, or if you're giving toward the designated offering, enter $ amount followed by the word special. You can also mail a check the old-fashioned way, and you can find our mailing address also on our website. Thank you for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We'll close with these words, The Purpose of This Community, by Eric Walker Wickstrom. If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if none of us has changed since the day we came here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth this morning not who you were, but who you could be. So may we all go in peace.